Welcome back to Smart Life. Most call it red tape, but for businesses, both large and small, government regulation is more of a red noose of sorts. Regulation has become both an excessive waste and an abuse of power. It's no longer limited to federal oversight, but now has seen a wildfire spread through state legislators. At a time where our economy really needs growth from businesses, state governments, such as, of course, California, are driving businesses to other states, and the federal government is driving businesses out of the country altogether. Joining us now is a man who's been documenting the excessive regulation and the way that businesses have come on the front line of the battle to win back the rights of businesses to exist, really, without all of this red tape and cumbersome things that drive businesses away. It's happening more and more on the state level. Richard Ryder, chairman of San Diego Tax Fighters. I tell you, I am a huge fan of Uber. First of all, I'm a fan of competition. I'm a fan of open shops and capitalism and allowing businesses to compete for my dollar. And maybe I take it too far, but one of the things that has happened is this Uber has emerged. Uber being a car service, a lot like a cab. You call them from an app on your phone. They come, the cars are clean. The people, by and large, they do this crazy thing called speaking English, and so you can talk to them. It's a whole different feel from what is a typical New York cab. And I travel in New York a lot, and I tend to try to take Ubers. Now you can take them anywhere, but I tend to try to take Ubers whenever I can. And one day, the very first time I tried them, I'd been all over New York that day, and I had a very, very tight time schedule, and I had left my iPad in a cab. And of course, I knew that I would never see it again. My daughter, right about that same time, was traveling in New York a couple weeks later, and she left, I think it was an iPhone in a cab. I'm probably telling this wrong. But anyway, in an Uber, and she got it back. So since then, I have been taking Uber, because after you take Uber, you rate it. You know, you lose something in a yellow cab or one of those cabs in New York, and it's just gone forever. But if it's in an Uber, they care because they want your feedback. That's what competition does. And now the state of California is trying to lead the way in basically eradicating Uber, saying it cannot be here in California anymore. First of all, can they do that? Can California just push them out?
They can on either the local or the state level. Seattle, which is interesting to me because it's one of the more progressive cities.
Right.
They pride themselves, Microsoft, Bill Gates, so forth. So they just banned Uber, which is a remarkable concept. They're favoring the cartel system of the cabs, where the cabs have agreed to limit the number of cabs through medallions, which is a license to be a cabbie. They don't allow enough of the medallions, therefore what that means, of course, is you have a shortage, and a shortage allows them to charge higher prices and so forth. Uber has come in and provided not only competitive pricing, but also far superior service. It's kind of the car service version of eBay. In eBay, you don't know people, but you can check them out. You can look up what their rating is, and there's this constant feedback, and everybody knows this. Uber knows it, every driver knows it, and when they're sending somebody to you for a pickup, you can look before they get there and say, oh, you know, this guy's doesn't have very good rating. I'm going to take somebody else. You can do that. So the drivers know this. It changes the whole parameters. And not only, the thing's interesting to me is we talk about Uber kind of like we talk about Kleenex, but there's other competitors.
Other competitive brands.
And there's let's see, there's Lyft, there's Sidecar, Go Green Ride, Get Taxi. There's all kinds of variations. Each one has a somewhat different plan. They're all trying to find what works. Some pluses, some minuses, compare with Uber. That's great. That's exactly what we want. We want different competing entities. And the next step, which hasn't happened yet, but it will happen, is as the supply of these companies and the number of vehicles on the street picks up, we're going to see what we haven't seen today, but we're going to see more of, which is price competition, which benefits you and I.
Exactly.
This is something I think we all want to see. Yet the government feels they have to step in. There was a funny case in Europe where Uber is already in, I think it's 22 countries. Wow. It's remarkable what they've done. The cabbies in Europe decided to go on strike. In London, they went on strike. But it's not like going on strike at a plant where you're the only employees, or government where you have a monopoly. And so they went on strike that day. The number of people who signed up for Uber had an 8-fold increase.
Wow.
They drove business to Uber because they were on strike. They didn't think this through.
But that's what business is all about, don't you think? I mean, that's the way it should happen, Richard. And see, this is, here I go getting really cynical, but I think there's a much more sinister motive.
Oh, there is.
To eliminating companies like Uber. And that is, if you take this fair competition rule to its extreme, you could do things like eliminate big governing bodies, for example, the EPA, because you could just let companies compete. You could eliminate the Department of Education. I mean, if we had competitive education, would you really need a federal head telling you what to do? You could even possibly look at eliminating things like food controls, at least some of them, or at least shrinking that bureaucracy way down, because if there was good consumer review on your local farmer down the road that brings your milk to the corner store every week, and consumers were rating that milk and keeping a good eye on it, everybody was staying healthy on it, then what's the FDA going to, how are they going to rationalize their next big pay increase?
What I tell people is, who would you trust? Would you trust the EPA? Would you trust the FDA? Or would you trust Consumer Reports? And most people, without flinching, say Consumer Reports.
Right.
And they're not the only firm provides this service. There's others as well. They do a much better job than any government agency in better rating what these products are. And they're not compulsive. Government only does two things. It either says you must do this or you can't do that. There's no advisory service there at all. And we don't need that. We need other ways of getting feedback as to what works, what doesn't work. Our doctors need it. Businesses need it. It opens up so many different vistas. In the case of the cabs, it's very much a kickback situation. In the 70s in San Diego, we had what we called the yellow cab scandal. There were paybacks coming from the yellow cab companies to restrict the number of cabs to the politicians. And so they still have this very close relationship, political contributions and so forth. The government doesn't have to do anything about Uber. It just has to leave it alone.
Right.
That's all that's necessary.
And in the long run, tell us why that would benefit even the people who think it's going to hurt them. Maybe at first, some cab driver is not going to have as much business, but he's probably going to improve his craft and probably going to be driving a better car ultimately, and probably going to have a lot more respect from the clients he's moving around if competition is introduced. It just is, there's a magic about that, isn't there?
There is, and indeed many of the cab drivers now can't afford a medallion. It can cost $25,000, $100,000 for the right to have a cab. So somebody has the medallion, they have the cab, they let other people drive the cab, they drive it 24/7, and that's a tremendous cost that most the guys in the cabs can't afford. But they could afford. You can buy it. You have to have a quality car. There are various requirements. Uber requires one that's at least no more than 10 years old. It has to be in good working condition, and you have to have a clean driving record. If you got a DUI, you will not be an Uber driver.
Right.
So they have the ability to control that, but it opens up the bottom-up capabilities. And this is a real important thing, because what has happened with all this regulation, I don't think it's fully understood, it really doesn't oppress big business. It oppresses,
really hurts the little guy.
It hurts the minorities. It hurts
every time. Just exactly like the minimum wage increase that you and I have discussed. And I wanted to get to that today, but we're out of time. Thank you so much for being with us, Richard. You can find him on Twitter at SD_taxfighters. SD_taxfighters.